We don't take charity cases here, especially not some old guy who can't even walk straight. The taxi driver snaps as 82-year-old Frank Morrison grips his worn cane tighter. The busy hospital parking lot buzzes with onlookers as Frank stands there, his weathered purple heart pin barely visible on his faded jacket, while the driver speeds away, leaving him stranded in the rain. What happens next will restore your faith in humanity and show you why we must never forget our heroes. If stories like Frank's matter to you, hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments about a veteran who changed your life. Let's honor them together. Frank Morrison stood outside the Veterans Affairs Medical Center, watching the yellow taxi disappear into traffic. Rain soaked through his thin jacket as he shifted his weight on his good leg. The chemo treatment had drained him more than usual today, and the 3-mile walk home felt impossible. Another taxi pulled up. Frank waved his cane, hoping this driver would be different. The window rolled down halfway. "You going far, old man?" the driver asked, eyeing Frank's cane and hospital wristband. "Just to Maple Street," Frank said quietly. "About 10 minutes away." The driver shook his head. "Sorry, not worth the gas money. Try the bus." Frank's shoulders sagged. The bus stop was 6 blocks away, and his left leg throbbed from the shrapnel that had been there since 1968. But before he could respond, the taxi drove off. A small crowd had formed near the hospital entrance. People were heading home from work, picking up family members, going about their normal lives. Frank felt invisible among them. A third taxi approached. This time, Frank decided to be upfront about his destination and offered to pay extra. The driver, a middle-aged man with greasy hair, looked Frank up and down with obvious disgust. "What's wrong with you anyway? You drunk?" "No, sir," Frank replied. "I just finished cancer treatment. I can pay whatever fare you think is fair." The driver laughed harshly. "Cancer, huh? Look, buddy, I don't run a charity service for sick people. Find someone else to feel sorry for you." A woman nearby heard the exchange and approached. "That's terrible," she said to Frank. "I'd give you a ride, but I'm waiting for my husband's surgery to finish." The taxi driver rolled his eyes. "Lady, mind your own business. This guy probably doesn't even have real money. Look at him." More people started paying attention. A young nurse coming off her shift stopped walking. An elderly couple waiting for their son slowed their conversation to listen. Frank felt his face burn with embarrassment, but he tried one more time. "Sir, I have cash right here. I just need to get home. I'm not asking for charity." The driver got out of his car now, clearly enjoying the attention. "You know what your problem is, old man? You think the world owes you something because you're sick. Well, newsflash, nobody cares about your sob story." A security guard from the hospital started walking over, but the driver wasn't finished. "Look at you," he continued, his voice getting louder. "Probably haven't worked a real day in your life. Probably living off government handouts, expecting everyone else to take care of you." The crowd was growing. Some people looked uncomfortable, others seemed curious about the drama unfolding. Frank wished he could disappear. "I worked plenty," Frank said softly, his voice barely audible. "Oh yeah?" The driver mocked. "Doing what?" "Sitting around feeling sorry for yourself." A teenage boy with his mother whispered something. His mom shushed him, but kept watching. 2 construction workers on their lunch break stopped eating their sandwiches. A hospital volunteer pushing an elderly patient in a wheelchair had stopped to see what was happening. The driver was on a roll now. "You know what guys like you need? A reality check. The world doesn't revolve around your problems. Some of us actually work for a living instead of begging for handouts." Frank's hands trembled on his cane. The purple heart pin on his jacket caught. A ray of sunlight breaking through the clouds, but it was small and faded. Most people wouldn't notice it unless they looked closely. "Sir, I'm not begging," Frank said, trying to maintain his dignity. "I just need transportation home." The driver stepped closer, invading Frank's personal space. And I just told you no. What? Part of that, don't you understand? Are you deaf too? A nurse from inside the hospital had come out to see what the commotion was about. She recognized Frank from his regular treatments and looked concerned. The driver wasn't done humiliating him. You want to know what I think? I think you're one of those professional victims, always playing the pity card. Cancer, can't walk right, probably got a dozen other sob stories ready to go, the crowd murmured. Some people looked disgusted with the driver, others seemed unsure what to think. Frank's chest tightened. Not from the cancer, but from the weight of being treated like he was worthless. He'd faced enemy fire in Vietnam, survived 3 tours, lost friends, came home to protesters calling him a baby killer, worked factory jobs for 40 years, raised 3 kids, buried his wife 2 years ago, and now battled cancer alone. But standing in this parking lot, being mocked by a stranger, felt like one of his lowest moments. Maybe I should just call my neighbor, Frank thought. But Mrs. Chun was 85 herself and didn't drive anymore. The taxi driver sensed Frank's defeat and pushed harder. That's what I thought. No response because you know I'm right. You're just another burden on society. A young father holding his toddler's hand looked angry. Several people pulled out their phones, some probably to record, others maybe to call. Someone. Frank closed his eyes for a moment, remembering his drill sergeant's words from basic training 55 years ago. Hold your head high, soldier. You represent something bigger than yourself. When he opened his eyes, he stood a little straighter despite the pain. The driver noticed and laughed. Oh, now you want to act tough? What are you going to do, old man? Hit me with that stick? The security guard was almost there, but before he could intervene, a voice cut through the tension like a knife. Staff Sergeant Morrison? Is that you? Everyone turned. A man in his 50s wearing a crisp business suit was walking quickly toward them. His face showed a mix of recognition and concern. The taxi driver looked confused. The crowd sensed something was about to change. Businessman reached Frank and extended his hand. Staff Sergeant Frank Morrison, 1st Infantry Division. I can't believe it's really you. Frank squinted, trying to place the face. Do I know you? Lieutenant Colonel Rick Hayes, the man said warmly. But back then I was just Private Hayes. You saved my life in Siu Chi Province. March 1968. The parking lot went completely silent. Frank's eyes widened as the memory came flooding back. Ricky? Little Ricky Hayes from Alabama? That's right, sir, Rick's voice cracked slightly. You carried me 2 miles through enemy territory after I took shrapnel in both legs. Doctor said if you hadn't gotten me to the medic when you did, I would have died. The taxi driver's smug expression melted away. Rick turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding respect. This man, right here, is a genuine American hero. He has 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Silver Star for valor. He saved not just my life, but dozens of others during his 3 tours in Vietnam. The crowd pressed closer, their earlier indifference replaced by awe and shame. Rick wasn't finished. He came home from that war to people spitting on him and calling him names, but he never complained. He worked in a steel factory for 4 decades, raised a family, volunteered at the VFW, and continued serving his community. And now he's fighting cancer with the same courage he showed in combat. The taxi driver started backing toward his car, but Rick's voice stopped him. You, he said, pointing at the driver. You just spent 10 minutes humiliating a man who has more honor in his little finger than you'll have in your entire life. Several people in the crowd started clapping. The young father nodded approvingly. The nurse, who knew Frank, had tears in her eyes. Rick pulled out his phone. I'm calling my driver right now. Staff Sergeant Morrison, you're not taking any taxi today. My car will take you wherever you need to go. But Rick, Frank protested weakly, you don't have to, sir, with all due respect. Rick interrupted with a smile. You saved my life. The least I can do is make sure you get home safely." The taxi driver slunk back to his car, but Rick wasn't letting him off that easy. "Hold on there," Rick called out. The driver froze. Rick walked over to him, speaking quietly but loud enough for nearby people to hear. "I want you to remember this moment. The next time you think about judging someone based on their appearance or their struggles, remember that. You almost missed the chance to serve a genuine hero. That man fought for your right to be standing here, acting like a fool." The driver mumbled an apology toward Frank and quickly drove away. Rick's black sedan arrived within minutes, as his uniformed driver helped Frank into the back seat. Rick sat beside him. During the ride to Frank's small apartment, they caught up on 55 years of life. Rick had built a successful construction company, gotten married, had 4 kids, and never forgot the young soldier who had carried him to safety. When they arrived at Frank's building, Rick insisted on walking him to his door. "Frank," Rick said as they stood in the hallway, "I've been looking for you for years. I wanted to thank you properly." "You just did," Frank replied. "No, sir. I mean really thank you." Rick pulled out a business card. "I own Hayes Construction now. We specialize in making homes accessible for veterans and seniors. I want to renovate your place at no charge. New bathroom, wheelchair accessibility, whatever you need." Frank's eyes filled with tears. "Rick, I can't let you do that." Staff Sergeant Morrison, Rick said with the same respect he'd shown decades earlier, "You gave me a lifetime. Let me give you some comfort in yours." As Rick left, Frank sat in his worn armchair thinking about the day's events. The humiliation in the parking lot seemed like a distant memory now. His phone rang. It was his daughter calling from California. "Dad," she said excitedly, "someone posted a video online of what happened at the hospital today. It's going viral. People are calling you a hero." Frank chuckled. "I'm just an old soldier who needed a ride home." 3 days later, Frank's mailbox was stuffed with letters from strangers thanking him for his service. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about his military record. The VA hospital staff treated him like royalty during his next treatment. But the best part came 2 weeks later when Rick's construction crew finished renovating his apartment. Frank now had grabbed bars in his bathroom, a ramp to his front door, and a kitchen he could navigate easily with his cane. That evening, as Frank sat on his new porch ramp watching the sunset, he thought about something his old sergeant used to say. Sometimes life tests you in ways you never expect, but it also sends angels when you need them most. The taxi driver had seen an old, sick man who looked like a burden. Rick Hayes had seen the soldier who once carried him through hell and back. Frank smiled, touched the purple heart pin on his jacket, and realized that being truly seen for who you are might be the greatest gift of all.